It's interesting to notice that some of the most intellectually sharp and emotionally perceptive individuals are often the most mentally drained, not because they're overworked in a physical sense, but because their minds rarely slow down. They revisit conversations long after they've ended, imagine outcomes that may never occur, and find themselves awake in the middle of the night, not due to real problems, but because their thoughts refuse to settle. At the core of this lies a psychological contradiction. The same mental tendencies that make a person insightful, cautious, and empathetic can also become a source of constant fatigue. To understand this, it's important to look at what psychology says about people who think excessively, what's happening internally, how it develops, and what it reveals about them. In clinical terms, this pattern is often referred to as maladaptive rumination. It describes the mind's tendency to repeatedly cycle through the same thoughts, especially those tied to uncertainty, past experiences, or social interactions. Research from institutions like Yale University and the University of Michigan suggests that this habit is not rooted in weakness or simple anxiety. Instead, it is often linked to a heightened ability for pattern recognition. These individuals have brains that are continuously analyzing, interpreting, and searching for meaning. The issue isn't a lack of intelligence, it's the absence of an off switch. From a neurological perspective, this involves the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-reflection. In individuals who overthink, this area tends to remain highly active, even during periods meant for rest. At the same time, the brain's default mode network, responsible for internal dialogue, continues generating thoughts in the background. The result is a mind that is perpetually engaged, reviewing, anticipating, and rehearsing. What's particularly noteworthy is that this pattern often begins early in life. Many chronic overthinkers developed this habit during childhood or adolescence, especially in environments where outcomes felt unpredictable. In situations where emotions were unstable or mistakes carried heavy consequences, the brain adapted by becoming hypervigilant. It learned to anticipate, to prepare, and to stay mentally ahead as a form of protection. Seen from this angle, overthinking is not a flaw, it's a learned survival mechanism, a highly intelligent system responding exactly as it was conditioned to. However, not all overthinking presents in the same way. Psychologists typically distinguish between two forms. The first is reflective rumination, where individuals engage in introspection to better understand themselves and process emotions. When balanced, this can be a genuine strength, contributing to emotional intelligence and self-awareness. The second is brooding rumination, a more passive and often distressing pattern where individuals dwell on problems without moving toward solutions. This is where the negative impact becomes evident, affecting sleep, decision-making, and social confidence through excessive analysis. Most individuals who overthink move between these two states. A moment of healthy reflection can gradually shift into an unproductive mental loop without clear awareness. This transition is often subtle, partly because thinking itself feels productive. The brain remains active, giving the impression that progress is being made. Cognitive psychologists describe this as the illusion of progress. The mind feels engaged in problem solving, but in reality, it's simply repeating the same cycle. Dopamine also plays a role in reinforcing this behavior. The brain releases small amounts of this chemical during problem-solving activities, even when those problems are hypothetical. As a result, overanalyzing situations can become mildly rewarding. This is why simply telling someone to stop thinking is ineffective. The brain is biologically incentivized to continue. So what does this tendency actually indicate about a person? Research suggests something unexpected. A study published in Psychological Science found that individuals who engage in higher levels of rumination often score higher in cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and anticipate the thoughts and emotions of others. They tend to be more sensitive to social dynamics, more aware of subtle cues, and more attuned to the emotional atmosphere around them. In other words, the same mental processes that create exhaustion also contribute to deep perception. The challenge, however, lies in the imbalance. Awareness without resolution can become overwhelming. Overthinkers often notice everything, consider every possibility, yet struggle to reach clarity. The more they analyze, the more distant certainty can feel. This leads to an important realization emphasized in psychology. Not every problem can be solved through thinking alone. Some experiences require acceptance, decision, or emotional processing rather than continuous analysis. Therapeutic approaches often focus not on eliminating thoughts, but on changing how individuals relate to them. For instance, acceptance and commitment therapy introduces the concept of cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe thoughts without becoming absorbed by them. Instead of reacting as though every thought demands action, individuals learn to recognize thoughts as temporary mental events.
This shift creates distance. Rather than thinking, this situation is dangerous and must be solved immediately, the perspective becomes, my mind is generating a concern right now. That small distinction can significantly reduce the intensity of the experience. Ultimately, overthinking is not a defect or a sign of weakness. It reflects a highly active and adaptive mind, one that learned to stay alert in response to uncertainty. The real challenge is not to eliminate this thinking entirely, but to gradually teach the mind that constant vigilance is no longer necessary. At a deeper level, this is a universal human experience. Everyone carries mental patterns shaped by past environments and experiences beyond their control. While understanding these patterns may not erase them, it changes how much influence they hold. And often, that awareness is where meaningful change begins.